I know as a designer, I don't really love it when developers start changing my designs and making decisions in the face of technological constraints that I wasn't aware of when I was doing my design. And so I think having workshops can be a really great way to just facilitate that co-creation so that people's toes aren't getting stepped on. Once you sort of have a really strong sense of your user, as I mentioned, you really can't be a digital or technology business without that component of your business being in place. Then you can start talking about like the big ideas. What are we building? What do we want to do? How are these things sort of manifesting in like the making part of the business process? There's always like that making element. So design workshops are what you would sort of tap into there. You want a place where people can brainstorm and present ideas based on like their experiences or their knowledge that can be shared and talked about. And sometimes those ideas can be wild and crazy out of left field. And then other times they might be the most practical idea that people have just overlooked because they've gotten so far down a different path. And so you kind of want to surface that stuff in a really documented and formal way so that you can categorize, capture, and then focus. A really big part of the ideation and brainstorming part is going big and then coming back in and saying, okay, now we want to narrow these ideas down and balance them against like technology constraints or business constraints and kind of figure out like how can we still be creative and how can we still represent the user, but also do it in a way that makes sense for our business or is scoped in such a way that we're not putting expectations out there that just aren't realistic as we start to develop the product. And so design workshops are really useful for that. It's also really useful sometimes for bringing in non-designers to participate in the process. So oftentimes when I run design workshops, I like it when our front-end developers are in the room. I like it when the tech leads are in the room because they really know a lot. And so having them participate in the design process can help them feel a much stronger sense of ownership once they start the building phase. And then when they run into constraints or they run into problems and there's already that existing dialogue around like how we got to this decision, they can come back to you as the designer and say, I'm kind of stuck here, even though we talked about doing it this one way, like let's come up with some new ideas to solve this problem. And that's really important. I know as a designer, I don't really love it when developers start changing my designs and making decisions in the face of technological constraints that I wasn't aware of when I was doing my design. And so I think having workshops can be a really great way to just facilitate that co-creation so that people's toes aren't getting stepped on. And so there are lots of different activities that you can kind of do as part of this. There's usually a lot of like sketching involved, so kind of representing or even modeling ideas so that you're kind of just moving rapidly and developing a lot of ideas really quickly. I think sometimes it makes people a little bit nervous to do some of this stuff, but I have unilaterally always had great experiences getting people to sketch and draw and represent their ideas in a way that brings it out of their head and puts it down on paper, puts it in a way that people can share. Even doing something like a sailboat exercise, which kind of is about like you have like a drawing of like a big sailboat, and then you talk a little bit about like the things that are pushing you forward, like that's the wind and the sails, and then you talk about the things that are holding you back, and that's like the anchor of the boat. And so just getting those two competing things out on the page and brainstorming around it, you can really start to see and understand like why maybe people are pushing so hard in one direction, whereas people are, kind of putting up walls in another area. And then also it's a great way to kind of introduce new design skills into the organization as well. So things like building a pattern library, introducing skills like prototyping, service design, augmented reality. Those are all kind of fun way, like a design workshop is a fun way to kind of say like, if we were going to introduce an augmented reality component to our e-commerce app, what might that look like? And then you come up with really fun ideas like H&M has a color matching. So you could take a picture of a color that you see out in the wild that you like, and they'll show you all the products on their site in that color. I think that's pretty cool. I think it's First Dibs, the furniture design site. They have an app, in their app, a feature where if you find something that you like, you can point your phone at the space where you would put the product and it'll show you what it looks like. So if you have a pillow and you point the phone at your couch, you can see what the pillow looks like on your couch. And like, that's kind of neat. You know, I think that's a really great way to keep people engaged, keep them opening up your app, and then ultimately lead to conversion when they are ready to buy.
Right. One of our clients who's an art gallery, they have an AR component where you can literally point at your wall and see what the artwork will look like on the wall.
Yeah.
IKEA also did a phenomenal job with their furniture placement in a room. And I think, and honestly, I'm glad you bring up AR. AR is definitely one of those components that the technology hasn't quite caught up yet, but it's
coming.
Very future. And
totally.
You know, people need to start thinking about digital experience in a three-dimensional world now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and you know, it's in that point, like this is where Design Workshop would be great because a lot of people are just not familiar, right? There's the law of diffusion of innovation, right? The innovators know about the AR features, but we don't have the large majority that understands it yet.
Yeah.
So we need to educate the stakeholders. We need to educate the team members of the options, abilities, possibilities, and benefits, right? Because you have to decide whether AR is good for your company, if it's useful or not. For example, for jewelry companies, right? A lot of jewelry companies were one of the first ones to jump on doing augmented reality. But because jewelry is not bought so frequently, people wouldn't download the apps. So it was kind of a fluke, right? It's great for in-store if you're in retail and you could use technology to augment your catalogs, right, as a salesperson and help the customer see things and you can utilize it. But from a mobile standpoint, it was kind of a failure because people weren't really using the app so frequently, no matter how cool it is, right? This is the must-have versus nice-to-have type of a feature as well. On the other hand, you have furniture companies, you have other companies that are using AR really well. And so it's definitely a topic of discussion that people should start thinking about very heavily. And simply because, when 5G networks kick in, they will allow augmented reality to run in your mobile phones without having to be an app. You'll be able to utilize the 5G network to, build, so AR, for those that don't know, or augmented reality consumes a lot of resources and it consumes a lot of data in order to produce a 3D environment. And so in order for it to work today, the AR experience needs to run within a mobile app. When 5G networks start to expand, you'll be able to get that same experience within your mobile website. And so that's when a lot of change will happen. That's when e-commerce is going to level up to a completely different plane. So something to consider in your next design workshop is, do you need AR? When should you prepare for it? And how do you integrate it? And to your point, Elaine, this is where a techie would be a great person to have, a developer in a workshop to answer these technical questions, because designers are probably not going to know the answer to that.
Yeah, they're not, for sure. You learn a lot in those circumstances. I love working with developers because I just learned so much about the complexity of what's going on behind the scenes. And then the more knowledgeable I am, the earlier into the process we can bring those requirements and have discussions about how my wireframes and my documentation can better situate them so that when I'm handing that stuff off to the developers, their language is already embedded in what I've written down or what I've designed. in e-commerce, one of the things that you touched on is like context is everything in an omni-channel world. Like people aren't just like in these silos kind of sitting in front of their computer shopping and then closing their computer and then getting in their car and driving to their store. People are shopping all the time. They're having conversations over brunch. They're on their phones inside your store. They're on your phones maybe inside of a pop-up shop at a different store where you've got products. And so there's just all this kind of this churn happening. And if you aren't doing the heavy lifting to kind of figure out like where your customers are when they're interacting with your brand or your product, then you're not going to be able to design solutions for them that are there to kind of meet those needs or improve on those experiences.
One thing, can I just add one more thing to the design workshop? And I think this is critical, much like augmented reality. Artificial intelligence is starting to play a major role in how data is being used and how we create digital experiences. And so you see, we saw an introduction over the past few years of chatbots, which unfortunately failed miserably. But now you have the reintroduction of that technology in a more of an interactive user experience, right? So you have you have UI that kind of communicates with you, and it asks you questions, and it guides you, through different journeys, and it's becoming a lot more dynamic. The experience. And so in the design workshops, which I think like as e-commerce, for example, is becoming incredibly crowded today, right? Before, nobody knew what e-commerce was. Now everybody knows what e-commerce is. Everybody's got a website, but now since it became so crowded, the experiences are starting to look bland. And so personalization is starting to be that next level. And how do you personalize a user experience? And that's with help of machine learning and natural language processing and artificial intelligence tools, where you could blend the visual experience with data and with interaction. And artificial intelligence will help us create these experiences. And it's in such an infancy, such a baby stage that you will see in the next couple of years a drastic boom in different user experiences. And so even if you have a well-established brand and if you have a well-established e-commerce presence, you have to consider what happens next. And it's good to have design workshops to do a kind of a check-in, right? How do we push the envelope? Where do we go next? What is our next opportunity that we can look into? And you could have an opportunity with AR, you have an opportunity with AI, you have an opportunity with both of them potentially. So, emerging technology also gets strong consideration during the design workshops, because that's when designers can start pushing their envelope. Designers have creativity. They need to know if the technology can keep up. This is when you have the members, the developers join the team, and that's when creativity really pushes the design. And I think that's where magic happens. This is where certain companies tend to emerge, right? And if you think back, when e-com was just kind of getting out there, somebody like Warby Parker came on board and decided that, you could try on glasses on, with taking a picture, and the people was just mind blown. Something like Blue Nile came on board 18 years ago and brought a diamond search. Unfortunately, that experience hasn't changed since, but it is what it is. Design workshops give us that opportunity to push the envelope, to really push the into the next stage of experience.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a playful, creative space if you want that magic to happen. Like, it's just not, if everybody's going about their business, doing their job day to day, like, the magic isn't going to spark in the same way. Like, it's just not.
And look, in reality, the truth of the matter is, right now, digital seems to be the only option. So how do you create a retail-like experience, or close as possible, online? right?
Totally.
And it's not like there's just tools laying out there that you could just plug and play, and all of a sudden your e-commerce is now a virtual workshop. Virtual, not a workshop, virtual retail shop, right? It's no longer about digital cataloging. It's now about digital experiences, and I think that's where brands need to start understanding. You have to graduate from a digital catalog to a digital experience. So this way you can be omni-channel by default.